Hi guys, I'm Harrison. I'm a sophomore mechanical engineering major. And tonight I would like to share with you guys a very beautiful personal aspect of my life that I don't think a lot of people know about. So for those of you who aren't aware, I have a sibling who has Down syndrome. His name is Luke, and because he has Down syndrome, he's a huge part of my life and has been he's been a big effect of the stuff that I do. And so tonight I'm going to kind of go over what Down syndrome is a little bit, and I'm going to go into the theme of tonight's presentation, which is the title that different isn't bad. And then I'm going to go a little bit into some of the work I did this summer with the National Down Syndrome Conference there. So first off, I kind of wanted to start with a question, and now this may be a little bit of a sensitive question to some people. So if you want to answer yes, just raise your hand. And the question is, how many of you sometimes feel uncomfortable when you interact with someone who has special needs? Okay, thank you guys for your honesty. So this is perfectly normal, and I feel it too, even though I have a sibling with Down syndrome. But I've thought about this, and the reason why this is because we know that there's a difference present between, someone who has special needs and someone who doesn't. And so because of that, you get a little nervous or worried about why, what their reaction would be to certain situations. And so that can kind of affect the way that you can think of other people. And so I'm hoping that through tonight's presentation that we're able to kind of end some of those negative stigmas and feelings that you have towards people with special needs. So first off, I wanted to introduce, this is an essay title of an essay that's very close to my heart and my family's heart. So when Luke was born in 2005, we weren't ready for a child with Down syndrome. And rarely is it the case that a family is, because it's like you had this lifestyle plan where you're going to have this child and you had everything planned out, and all of a sudden the plans just change immediately. And so when Luke was born, one of the first people who visited my mom in the hospital was my godmother, Kelly. And she's just an awesome woman, and she works a lot with children with special needs. And so she shared this essay with my mom right as she's holding Luke walking around the hospital room. And after I heard the story about it, it's life-changing. And I'd like to read it to you guys real fast. It only takes about 2 minutes, but it kind of synthesizes the theme for tonight. So this is Welcome to Holland by Emily Pearl Kingsley. When you're going to have a baby, it's like planning a fabulous vacation trip to Italy. You buy a bunch of guidebooks and make your wondrous plans, the Colosseum, the Michelangelo David, the gondolas in Venice. You may even learn some handy phrases in Italian, and it's all very exciting. After months of eager anticipation, the day finally arrives. You pack your bags and off you go to Italy, and several hours later the plane lands. The stewardess comes in and says, "Welcome to Holland." Holland, you say? What do you mean Holland? I signed up for Italy. I'm supposed to be in Italy. All my life I've been dreaming of going to Italy. But there's been a change in the flight schedule, and they've dropped you in Holland, and there you must stay. It's important to realize, though, that they haven't taken you to a horrible, disgusting, filthy place full of pestilence, famine, and disease. It's just different. So you must go out and buy new guidebooks, and you must learn a whole new language, and you will meet a new group of people that you probably wouldn't have met before. It's just a different place. It's slower paced than Italy. It's less flashy, but after you've been there for a while and catch your breath, you look around and you know that Holland has windmills, and Holland has tulip gardens, and Holland has these cute little wooden shoes. But everyone you know is busy coming and going from Italy, and for the rest of your life you will say, yes, that's where I was supposed to go. That's what I had planned. But if you spend your entire life mourning the fact that you never went to Italy, you'll never be able to realize the beautiful things that you have for yourself in Holland. And so that was what my godmother recites this from memory. It's one of the most beautiful stories I have with my little brother. It's kind of this theme that just because something's different doesn't mean it's bad. And I want to talk a little more about that because that's the theme for tonight. Something that comes up sometimes when people find out that you have a sibling or a family member with special needs, or in my case with Down syndrome, is they're like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." And it's like, well, sorry for what? It's like, just because my lifestyle is a little different than yours, and my family goes about doing things a little different than your family would, doesn't mean that my life is better or worse off than yours is. Because just like you, everyone sitting in this room, we all do things a little differently, and just because someone has a mental condition or some type of disability doesn't mean that it makes my life worse. And so it's the idea of acknowledging that our differences between us aren't bad things, and that they all can be recognized with something beautiful. And so, real fast, I want to give you a little bit of some information about what Down syndrome is, so you can kind of understand this better. So this is the definition, kind of the textbook definition of Down syndrome. I watered it down. But Down syndrome is a mental condition that begins during the first stages of development in which multiplying cells produce an extra chromosome 21. Biochem majors, I'm sorry, I'm going to describe this process and I'm probably going to screw it up. But when you have cells that multiply, right, for everyone who doesn't know, like each of the chromosomes, there's like 24 little bits of DNA from your mom and from your dad. And when your cells multiply, they create new little bits of DNA. And for some reason, in people with Down syndrome, the 21st chromosome is multiplied an additional time, so that you have 3, totaling to 49 chromosomes. And this has led to some wonderful t-shirt designs that I saw at the conference, like homies, which X are chromies. Yeah, it's pretty great. And then there was also a really beautiful talk that a guy gave going along the theme that different isn't bad, and he called it the love chromosome. And he talked about how could we look upon people with Down syndrome as lesser, even if they have this extra chromosome, when it gives them so much love and wholesomeness and makes them beautiful people. Because just because they're different from us and they have this difference, how can we look on them as lesser? And so with that in mind, and now that you know what Down syndrome is, I'd like to introduce you to someone who's very special to me. And that's my younger brother, Luke. Yeah, I know. So this is me, that's my sister, Carly, and that's my younger brother, Luke, in the middle. And this was at the National Down Syndrome Conference that we attended over the summer. Our whole family went. It was a really awesome event. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Something that comes up when I talk to people about having a child with Down syndrome, and I kind of think about this question on my own as well, is they're like, what would life be like if you didn't have a sibling with Down syndrome? And it's kind of a weird question because I really don't know, because life is completely different, and I can't remember what Carly was like growing up, so because I was too little, and so it's too difficult of a comparison to make. And I'm not saying I would change it at all. I wouldn't change Luke at all. But it's very interesting. And so in preparing for the speech, I kind of thought of what are 3 things that I've learned, 3 very important lessons that I've learned in life because I have a sibling with Down syndrome. And so I have these 3 really important lessons, and they all come with really cute stories, so I think you're going to like these. So the first one, emotions are expressed differently for everyone. So this is Luke. His favorite show is Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. And this is him live losing his mind because he is meeting Daniel Tiger in person for the first time. It was absolutely adorable. And so something really interesting about people with Down syndrome is they're like emotional superheroes. And I don't mean like, Superman on like a bad day or something like that. Like, I mean, they have like superpowers with emotions, and that they internalize emotions a lot differently than you and I. So if you and I had a bad day, we have a bad day at work, we get yelled at school or something like that, we go on the way home and we're thinking about it in our mind, and we think about it over and over and over and over again, and we internalize it until finally our mind's like, okay, we've thought about it enough, we've mulled it over, let's move on. So for people with Down syndrome, and I found this out with Luke, is that they externalize their emotions in order for them to internalize them. So after Luke has a day where like a significant event has happened, like whether he's gotten in trouble or something very exciting has happened, he actually goes and locks himself in his room and recites his day event by event from memory, which is really interesting. And so you'll hear him shouting from inside his room, and you're like, what is wrong? And it's just him thinking over his day out loud. And so he goes through this, and that's how he can that's how he goes over and internalizes these emotions that he felt throughout his day, is by reliving each moment that's piece by piece. Something else that's really cool is that whenever you're having a conversation with someone who has Down syndrome, is they internalize the emotions of your face and your like facial structure and facial emotions a lot more than people without Down syndrome. So this made for a nifty trick for my parents that they found it at the conference, because when kids with Down syndrome will do something to get attention, it's because they want to see your facial emotion, and they want to see the emotions present, like when they do something that they're not supposed to get attention. So what's the one cure? Is you just don't show them your face. So we're walking through downtown Dallas, and this is right after my parents had found out about this, so they told us about it. And so Luke does something that he normally does to get attention. was to just smack Carly in the back as hard as he can. And he knows he always gets a reaction, which is normally, a slap back or something like that. But this time, the entire family in unison just turns around. So if you're a bystander watching this event happen, you see this child smack his sister, and the entire family just disacknowledges his presence for like 5 seconds. I know you're like, that's mean. Okay, hold on. But then once we turn around again, he was so taken aback that he didn't get a reaction about it that he's immediately like, I'm sorry. And he starts hugging my sister and everything. And it was just crazy and made me realize how differently people with Down syndrome internalize and externalize their emotions. So that was lesson number 1. Lesson number 2, joy can be found anywhere. Something that Luke's really good at is he can find joy doing the most mundane activities that people normally wouldn't find a whole lot of happiness in. Whether it's going to the grocery store or mowing the lawn, these are just things that he finds happiness in, and there's many more. So I'll give you an example here. But how many of you put on deodorant this morning? How many of you had fun putting on deodorant this morning? Woo! Yeah! Right? So for those of you who put on deodorant this morning, thank you also. You probably put it on and just were thinking about something else and went about your day and didn't think about it again. But I want to show you just the amount of joy, because Luke's starting puberty right now, so we're learning all about deodorant and other stuff.
No. Come on, hold it in your hand. I know it tickles. We're going to do 1. Ready? The other one, ready? Hold up to it. Every day we laugh that hard.
You can see some of the adventures that can be made out of just some of the most mundane activities. And so for this second lesson, Luke has kind of taught me how many things do I go through in my daily life that I take for granted or I just look over that give me some source of happiness or enjoyment. And so acknowledging those events and being thankful for them and the stuff in our lives that we often look over that means a lot to us is something that I've learned from having a sibling with special needs. I'm not saying you have to be happy when you put on deodorant every morning or have that reaction, but look in your life for those events that do give you happiness or some source of joy and be thankful for those and find out what those are. The last lesson I've been taught, let me see, there we go. Okay, it takes very little to make someone happy. And so this is Luke with my sister Carly at one of her volleyball games. He's her biggest fan. And so Luke's presence in a room can automatically just light up the environment. He's very good at making other people laugh and just making other people happy. And so this next story is often, if someone asks me like, what is it like having a sibling with Down syndrome, this is normally the story that I resort to. So in my 8th grade year, we went to Hawaii, and it was the last day of the vacation, so we're on our way back, and so we're sitting in the airport. Luke's about 8 years old, and we're sitting off to like the side seats in the terminal at the very end in Hawaii, and there's this long row of chairs that goes right up the middle. And so Luke is on his iPad, and he wants to play Duck, Duck, Goose. We're like, that's fine, we're going to play it right here, in our little family unit where no one else can get ducked or goosed. So we're sitting there, and we're like, okay, fine, we'll play. So we start playing for a couple minutes, and everything's fun, and Luke's having a blast. And all of a sudden, he kind of looks behind him at the row of people standing behind him. And he goes down the line going, duck, 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 duck. That's not the best part. So there's like a 65-year-old man sitting at the very end of the chair, end of the seats, and Luke goes up all the way. And he tags the guy and he goes, goose, takes off. And for a split second, there's this moment of like fear and excitement because you don't know what's going to happen. And that 65-year-old man leapt from his chair and chased my brother down the terminal. Yeah, and it was, I can't make this up. It was one of the most beautiful events I've ever witnessed from having a sibling with Down syndrome. And the reason why is because one 8-year-old boy with special needs playing Duck Duck Goose in an airport terminal brought joy and happiness to a group of people that he'd never met before. And so it made me realize how one little act can bring so many people joy and so many people happiness. And that's by far one of my favorite stories to share. And so now that you know how awesome and amazing Luke is, you'd understand why that our family would get involved with the National Down Syndrome Conference. And so this is what I did this summer. The National Down Syndrome Conference was in Dallas, Texas, and it's an absolutely amazing event. It gives people a chance to learn more about what it means to have Down syndrome. Because a lot of times there's not a whole lot of resources for people who want to learn more. So this is a great outlet for families to go to and stuff like that. So my job is I was a sibling leader for the sibling camp. So I was in charge of a bunch of kids who had a sibling with Down syndrome, and so we would lead them in a bunch of activities for the day and stuff like that. And while the parents were off at workshops learning more strategies for parenting and stuff like that. So we taught them about the importance of advocacy. And the reason why advocacy is important is if a group doesn't have a voice or can't stand up for themselves in today's society, they will be walked on by everyone else. It's just kind of how everything happens. And so as a sibling of someone who has Down syndrome, it's something I take pride in, is the fact that I get to be the voice for a whole community of people who have special needs. So it's my job and my duty to be an advocate for those people. And so then tonight, in addition, I would like to show you guys some of the 3 things that we told the siblings at the conference about how to advocate for people with special needs. First one, recognize and support inclusive media. So I don't know if anyone saw the Gerber baby from last year, but it was the first Gerber baby to have Down syndrome. He's absolutely adorable. And Old Navy's doing the same thing. They have models now in their lineup that have Down syndrome. And the reason why this is so important is because it brings Down syndrome out of the shadows and kind of gives it, it allows people to see that people with Down syndrome can be involved in acting and in commercials and in advertisement and all these other things, and it makes it seem less of a strange thing when you see someone with special needs outside of, or when you see someone with special needs, just walking about. And so inclusive media is the first very important one. The second one is people first language. There's a reason why I'm not saying or trying not to say Down syndrome people, the Down syndrome man, or the Down syndrome boy. And the reason why is because right there I've just completely unacknowledged them as a person and only associated them with their mental condition. People with Down syndrome, the man with Down syndrome, the boy with Down syndrome, because people who have Down syndrome are people. They're human beings with their own beautiful characteristics and personalities and everything that makes them wonderful people. And so it's super important that we acknowledge them as people before we acknowledge the fact that they have a mental condition. The last one is a little harder hitting, but it is still very important to come across, and it's stop using the R word. And the word I'm talking about is retarded. A lot of times you'll hear people use this word as an insult, like your buddy does something dumb and you're like, well, that was really retarded of you. Or if something's going really slow, you say, well, this is just retarded. But it's important to stop using the word retarded to describe negative events that happen in your life. And the reason why is because when you use the word retarded to describe negative things in your life, you've created this negative stigma and relation between that and people who have special needs and can't change the fact that they are scientifically mentally retarded. And so when you use the word retarded in a negative sense, how is someone supposed to disassociate the negative event with someone that they see walking up the street who has special needs? And so that's why it's super critical that people stop using the R word in a negative sense so that they can avoid kind of the negative stigmas that go along with it. And so I have this I just wanted to share a little bit more about what the conference is before I leave you with one last point. So more about the conference. The reason why the conference is such a valuable thing is that, like for my family, we had Luke, we weren't prepared for the fact that he would have Down syndrome. And it wasn't like a negative catastrophe that we weren't prepared for, It wasn't like something really bad happened. It was just like he said earlier, it was a different change in lifestyle. And it wasn't necessarily bad, it's just something that we weren't prepared for. And so the reason why this conference is so important is because it allows people to learn about parenting strategies, or sibling relations. Something I didn't realize is what happens after my parents are gone, which isn't fun to think about, but they brought up that point. They said, once your parents are gone, you are the caretaker for your sibling. And that's kind of a weird thing to think about, going through life. And so it's stuff like that, having those resources of what to do. Another really cool thing is it allows people with Down syndrome to interact with other people who have Down syndrome. So they have a lot of networking and stuff like that. It just allows everyone, it forms a whole beautiful community of people that are able to come together and just kind of share this one commonality that they all have. So with that, and to kind of sum up the themes of advocacy and the themes of different isn't bad, I want to leave you with this last story before I go. So on the second night of the conference, they had a dance, and it was a lot of fun. We were in Texas, so when in Rome, you dress like a cowboy. So we were all dressed as cowboys, and it was really awesome. All these families and people with Down syndrome were there. There was a group of guys who actually, with Down syndrome, who reunited because they hadn't seen each other since the last conference, and so they were dancing and laughing and taking pictures and everything. So I was hanging out with the sibling leaders, and we were dancing with this young group of teenagers who had Down syndrome. And so there was this young girl there. She was 14 years old. Her name's Victoria. And she was dancing by herself. I'm like, I'm going to ask her to dance. And so right when I asked her to dance, though, I suddenly got that negative, uncomfortable feeling of not knowing that we talked about in the very beginning. Even though I was there at a Down syndrome conference as a leader, it was like, oh my gosh, is she going to tell me no? Or like, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, all the fears of middle school came rushing back. It was the fear of not knowing. And so finally I was like, you know what, this is something that we got to do. And so I walked up and I said, hi, I'm Harrison, what's your name? She said, Victoria. I said, you look very nice this evening. She said, thank you. I said, would you like to dance? And she said, yes. And immediately her face lit up. And so Roar by Katy Perry came on. And we just danced for the whole song. And I realized I didn't have to be good. I didn't have to be on beat. I didn't have to do anything crazy. Just the fact that I had asked her to dance and was there acknowledging her and had, just been there with her for that made her so very happy. And so I leave you with this last challenge. There's always going to be someone in your life that is going to be different than you. And it's going to be they have an extra chromosome, they have some type of mental condition, they're a different religion, they identify as something different from you, or maybe they have a different skin color. And the way we need to acknowledge that different isn't bad is simply by just being there with them and acknowledging their presence and knowing that just because someone is different than us doesn't mean it's a bad thing. And so something you could do is if someone is different than you, just reach across the aisle, take them by the hand, introduce yourself, and just start dancing to Roar by Katy Perry.